Everybody. So yesterday I had a debate on Finding Noses channel, and unfortunately I did not get an opportunity to explain what I was trying to say. So I decided I'm just going to do a live stream to explain my position. And my position basically is that there is no such thing as a natural father. Fatherhood is a social construct, and I'm going to explain what I mean by that. Okay, let me see if there's anybody here. Um, Sorry, I have my outline here and I just lost it. Is anybody here? Let me see before I get started. Okay, yeah, this I guess this is a neutral position because it's probably going to be helpful to both men and women. All right, just give me 1 second, y'all. I'm sorry to start a live stream unprepared, but it's like I just lost my outline for some reason. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started. All right, so I just want to start off by talking about three concepts because I was talking about them earlier in that or yesterday in that live stream, and I didn't get a chance to explain. I was talking about the state of nature and the state of society. And somebody said I was making an appeal to nature. I was not making an appeal to nature. The state of nature is human beings without governments, laws, or institutions, without courts, without you can have contracts, but they would not be enforced by the state. Uh, you would only have claims that you would be able to defend yourself without relying on the state. And then the state of society is a social contract where there's rules and institutions, and the state has monopoly on violence. And I also want to talk about natural rights versus positive rights. Natural rights exist before the state. They're pre-political. Positive rights are created by law. They don't exist in a state of nature. They're entirely a social construct. So once you understand how that works, a father has no natural rights over the child. The any rights that any paternal rights that the father has is based entirely on a social construct. Um, he can have positive rights, but not natural rights. Now, obviously, the father contributes equally to the genetic makeup of a child. Half of that child's nature comes from the father. And it seems unfair that, the father, after contributing his genetic material, does not get an equal say. John Locke has already addressed this. He argued that parents have parental power, which belongs to the parents equally. Um, Now, John Locke was took a different position than Rousseau. He didn't believe in a social contract the way that Rousseau did. He believed in natural rights, pre-political rights. And so, according to John Locke, parental power is not a gift from the state, but is a pre-political obligation arising from the act of bringing the child into the world. John Locke did not frame this as parental rights. He framed it as having parental duties. The reason why it's not considered a right is because children are not property. So parents don't actually have rights, they only have duties. Across every culture and history, um, Parents have been recognized as having some claim over their children. Thomas Hobbes argued that in a state of nature, dominion over a child belongs to the mother. She bears it, delivers it, preserves it. The father's contribution, however real, is invisible at birth. Paternity cannot be seen or verified without institutions. A right to mean anything at all requires three things: a claim, someone obligated to respect that claim, and a mechanism to enforce it when it is denied. So basically, what I'm saying is that it does not exist in a state of nature. In a world without courts, without law, without a state, a father's claim on a child is simply his word. If the mother refuses him access, nothing in nature would compel her to give her access. Now, to get to the universality of it, all societies have constructed parental rights for the fathers. Um, every civilization needed to solve the problem of paternity. Now, let's get back to Locke. Locke was arguing that parents don't have rights, they only have duties. He deliberately used the word parental power rather than, I'm sorry, yeah, parental power. Um, I'm kind of going off the cuff. It was not a right to be willed against other, but a temporary custodial duty lasting until the child reaches the age of majority. Um, Central to Locke's framework was the principle of self-ownership. So therefore, if you own yourself, your parents can't own you. And so parents have a duty to raise their children until they can become self-sufficient. Um, Maternity is witness. Basically maternity is inherent because you already know that you can determine just by fact, matter of fact, who actually gave birth to the child. Um, Paternity must be proven or assumed, and both require institutions. Neither exists in a state of nature. So the word father has been associated with the biological progenitor, the man who contributed genetic material. And there's also the social father, the man who performs the role of the parent. These are two different things. In ancient Rome, a man became a father not by begetting a child, but by recognizing it. The act of, let me try to pronounce this Latin word, is tolere liberos. Physically, physically lifting the newborn was the moment of fatherhood. If he walked away, the child was not his, regardless of biology. The law was not pretending that biology was the basis of fatherhood. It was openly and explicitly a social act of acceptance. The role was granted by society. The role of mother was witnessed by nature. For much of recorded history, fatherhood was primarily a mechanism for managing the transfer of property. The social construct of the father existed to ensure that land, titles, and wealth stayed within a specific lineage. This is why illegitimacy carried such a harsh social stigma. It was not a moral judgment about the child's existence, it was a property law concept. The child fell outside the legal framework that existed to regulate inheritance. Fatherhood has never been a biological act, it has always been a territorial or marital claim. We recognize adoptive fathers, stepfathers, co parents, and many others as fathers with full legal and social standing, despite having no biological connection to the child whatsoever. In each of these cases, fatherhood is defined entirely by action, intent, and performed duty, not by genetics. This is this is the logical endpoint of what fatherhood has always been: a set of behaviors that society has bundled together and labeled as a role. Now let's talk about the law. Under the presumption of paternity, if a woman was married, her husband is presumed to be the father of the child. It does not require confirmation by biology. It is presumed by virtue of a legal contract. Paternity is not established by biology alone. So, marriage does not prove that the man is the biological father. It declares him the legal father. Biology is completely irrelevant to this presumption. A man can be presumed to be the father of a child that is biologically someone else's. And in many jurisdictions, that presumption is extremely difficult to rebut, even with DNA evidence. I think I haven't researched the statutes, but I think there's a certain window where you can con, contest paternity if you're married. But after I forget, I saw somebody on YouTube talking about this. I believe it's after the age of 5 that basically it is your child legally, even if it's not your biological child. So why would men submit to this arrangement if it's not their natural child? It's only by social convention. What does the mother receive? The mother receives financial provision, physical protection, social legitimacy for herself and her children, legal status, inheritance rights for her children, and security that the state of nature does not guarantee. What does the father receive? The father receives a legally enforced presumption of paternity, his guarantee that his investment is worthwhile, a legitimate heir to carry his name and inherit his property, the sexual exclusivity that made the presumption reliable, and he also receives social standing as a man with a family and heirs. The presumption of paternity is the father's side of the bargain. Without it, why would any man commit his resources, his protection, his name to children he could not be certain were his? Marriage solved the paternity problem not by resolving it biologically. That was impossible until the modern era by making it legally irrelevant. The contract substituted the certainty that nature could never provide. This is why adultery was historically treated so severely and asymmetrically. A wife's adultery was fundamentally a breach of the marriage contract because it undermined the entire basis of the paternity presumption. The husband's investment was predicated on the presumption being reliable. Her infidelity did not just hurt his feelings, it voided the terms of the arrangement. Before the social contract existed, something else held the family unit together. In a state of nature, the mother had a powerful incentive to keep the father close, not because of his rights, but because of her need for protection. Without police, without shelters, without institutions, a woman with young children was physically vulnerable. The father's presence offered safety. His strength was his contribution, not just um, his biology. So, what looked like a family in a state of nature was really a mutual survival arrangement. She needed his protection. He stayed up because of his proximity and provision. The children knew him because he was there, not because the law said he had to be. This was the original family unit. It was built on necessity. When civilization arrived, it replaced the very thing that kept the father present. Courts, police, economic independence, and social infrastructure all dissolved the survival instinct that bound the original family together. What remains today is not based on natural rights, it's based on a civil contract. Now, what I was trying to explain yesterday, which I didn't even get to finish, was I was talking about Abraham in the Old Testament, how he had, well, I guess Hagar was his servant, and then Sarah was his first wife. Hagar actually had her child first, but Sarah was his wife who conceived after Hagar. So the children of Sarah were Abraham's heirs, right? Because of the contract of marriage. and the children of Hagar were not part of the marital contract. So Ishmael was sent away and was raised by his mother, belonging to her rather than to Abraham. Now, of course, Ishmael was Abraham's biological son, but the difference is there was a lack of a social contract. The marital covenant between Sarah and her children gave her children a right to the household and an inheritance. Without the contract, the biological connection granted nothing. I'm not saying that you should defer to the Old Testament to the extent, I mean, whether the Old Testament actually happened is irrelevant. It is historically accurate to the extent that it explains how marriages worked um, prior, like pre-political. So, I mean, you can look outside the Bible to find other examples of that, but the bottom line is that if you were not married, then your children had no right to inherit property. That's the point that I was trying to make. Your children were considered illegitimate. So, a marital contract is a legal contract registered with the state in which paternity is presumed by law, not by nature. We also have DNA paternity tests, which does not exist in the state of nature. We also have custody and visitation rights, which is granted by a family court enforced by the state. Outside of that, you can have a voluntary acknowledgement. Um, and of course, the state also can grant child support. These are all conventions that exist under the state of society. They don't exist in the state of nature. So all of these paternal rights exist under the state of society, under the state, the official state, because I think that term is also getting misunderstood. I was talking about the state of nature and the state of society. These are two different states. I'm not using it in the same context as a political state. So the bottom line is that you cannot become a legal father by without a state. That it doesn't exist in a state of nature. You necessarily have to be you need necessarily have to have a state in order to become a legal father. You cannot enforce your standing as a father without a state. You cannot even prove that you are the father in a legally meaningful sense without the state. So the conclusion is that paternal rights are entirely positive rights that are derived from the state. They don't exist in a state of nature. So what does the state give the mother? Maternity is presumed at birth. No legal action is required. Child support is a financial claim. In theory, child support is not really her claim, it's a claim for the child, but we know that it is the mother who actually receives the child support and controls how it is spent in the name of the child, but admittedly, it is administered through her. Um, her positive rights to the child are automatic and presumed. What does the state give the father? Paternity must be established through marriage, acknowledged, or there must be a court order. Custody and visitation must be petitioned for and granted at the court's discretion. His positive rights are conditional, earned, and subject to judicial approval. So, my conclusion is that there is no such thing as a natural father. The biological progenitor and the social father are two separate things. It has always been based on a social father, not the biological one. The law, the one that the law and society recognizes. Um, Children are not property, therefore, no one has rights to a child. Parents only have duties, obligations arising from bringing that child into existence. This is according to Locke. Now, I didn't put this in my outline, but I did want to say something about Plato. Plato did espouse the idea of orgies. I know I'm not trying to be purient, but he espoused the ideas of orgies so that no one, men would not know paternity. They would not know who their children were, and basically they would not become invested in the idea of creating a family. Um, he just thought that if they didn't know who their children were, they would have an investment in all children. This is in Plato's Republic. Let me see if I have any comments because I'm pretty much this did not go as organized as I hoped. Yeah, I imagine that. This is not an attack on men. I mean, I again, in a state of nature, a woman would not have any entitlement to child support either. So that is also a social construct. Child support is an invention by the state. Right. Those are all created by it. Well, really, I wouldn't frame that as a right. It would be a duty to discipline their children, and they I guess they have some discretion on how they're going to discipline their children. I wouldn't say it's a right. No one has a right to corporal punishment. That is a duty, and they have some discretion on how to do it, which can be an abuse of that discretion. I'm probably already losing people. I realize this is a controversial topic. I'm not speaking against men. I'm really just stating this as an observable fact that you cannot men don't have parental rights without a state. It's definitely there. It's definitely there because I remember reading it in undergrad, and yeah, we discussed it, and it was very controversial. I okay. After this live stream, I can cite it where it says that I'm not exactly sure how he worded it, but yeah, it's definitely there. So, all right, y'all. I just wanted to put that out there to explain what I was not able to say yesterday. I think it's self evident. I don't think I'm saying anything controversial. If anybody thinks that I'm wrong, I would like them to tell me how a father can have any paternal rights without a state or without the mother agreeing to it. Like the mother, what you would have to have a marital contract. Um, and the reason this whole conversation came up because we were talking about whether a man should have any say over whether a woman gets an abortion. And I would say no, because a man does not have natural parental rights. So again, it goes both ways. That's why I was asking Devon, would she forfeit any claim of child support if she's not going to respect the father's uh, right to paternity? And she said yes. If I'm going to raise the children on my own without his input, then I'm not going to ask for child support. All right, y'all. I'm sure I already lost some subscribers for doing this, but for whatever reason, I was compelled to try to clarify what I meant yesterday. So I hope this helps. I'm sure I lost some people, but if somebody wants to debate me on this point, I would be open to it. I just don't think that I'm saying anything that is debatable. Like, um, I can give you the sources. I can tell you the basis of natural rights versus positive rights. Um, Paternal rights are entirely based on the social contract. So, with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. Y'all have a good day. Unfortunately, my vacation is over. I have to work today. So, all right, have a good one.